Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we suspend Senate Rule 1B to allow a person other than a senator to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Members, this morning we are honored to have Mr. Thomas Barnes, who is here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance for the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Day. Mr. Barnes enjoys attending church, swimming, hiking, cooking, meeting new people, and writing stories. Thomas knows how to brighten up people's day like no one else and goes out of his way always to help others. So, Mr. Barnes, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please join me with the Pledge Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to a republic to which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you,
You ready?
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for a couple of moments of personal privilege.
You have heard the motion. You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Excuse me. The motion is that we proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege from the good senator from Jefferson County. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege from the good senator. Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have a moment of personal privilege?
Granted.
Thank you. Members, we have a tribute today that we would like to share with you in recognition of the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Awareness Day. We do have a number of guests that are here, and we wanted to make sure that we celebrated their presence here with us early on in the session. I'm going to read the tribute here. The Senate and House of Representatives convened in the second regular session of the 72nd General Assembly hereby extends heartiest congratulations and commendation in recognition of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Awareness Day. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities, also known as IDD, are defined by their strengths, their abilities, and their inherent value. And with appropriate resources, services, and personalized supports, they make decisions about their own lives and contribute to their communities. Community living is a fundamental moral, civil, and constitutional right for people with IDD, and IDD advocates or advocacy organizations, clinicians, researchers, policy analysts, community-based service providers, case managers, and direct support professionals work in partnership with people with IDD, parents, families, the legislature, the state agencies, in order to strengthen the service delivery system so that people can live productive, healthy lives in the community. On request of Senator Rachel Zenzinger and Senator Bob Rankin, Majority Leader Alec Garnett and Representative Colin Larson, given this 26th day of February 2020, State Capitol, Denver, Colorado.
Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I have a moment of personal privilege to join in co-sponsoring the tribute.
Granted.
You want to do your part first? So we would like to make a few personal comments and then ask any other members to join us. I guess for me, I'd like to talk about my personal journey to become an advocate for DD folks. I didn't know anything about intellectual and developmentally disabled individuals and the care they get. And my local community center board called me when I was running for office. He said, "You are not allowed to run for office until you come visit." So I did, and visited some of the group homes and got to know some of these wonderful people and the journey that they're on to lead, productive lives, and what we as a state need to do to support them.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, please have a seat. So we feel very strongly that we must work together to help our IDD community overcome barriers that are present here in Colorado. And one of those ways is by working on eliminating the waiting list for comprehensive services, which today we believe has close to 3,000 people that are still on the waiting list for comprehensive services. And today, as part of IDD Awareness Day, the community is going to be highlighting this waiting list. They're going to be talking to you, their legislator, to share with you their story. And on your desks, there's some information about the waiting list and its human impact on our state. Each of you has on your desk a story about someone who is currently on that list and someone who was recently enrolled into comprehensive services, and what a difference that has made for them and their family. So we encourage you to look at that information, and you'll get to hear more about the waiting list today at this afternoon's luncheon at noon.
Senator Rankin.
And so please, if you haven't already, please plan to attend this luncheon and meet some of these folks who are actually on the waiting list that has been going on for decades. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for supporting these folks. Thanks.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to add two more names that could be on your desks today. My uncle CJ received services, got off the list about 10 years ago. He was on the list for 7 years before he finally received the services that the state has promised to him. And my cousin Sarah, who FaceTimes me several times a week, she has been on the list for, I think, about 9 years now. And she is waiting to get off that list, waiting to get the services that, again, we as a state have decided that she should get. So please, this is something that affects families. This is something that we as a state need to prioritize in our budget. And I just, as you look at this, as you think about our budget this year, it is time, it is past time to end the wait for these services. Thank you.
Senator Janelle.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too rise in support and want to say thank you, and I hope that Larimer County folks are here, the ARC of Larimer County, Foothills Gateway, and the March Dimes, Wings, I believe, from Loveland. I too have a personal story, and it brings me so very close to this community because my former partner, who I'm still connected to because of this one beautiful young man, Justin, who we raised for 10 years together, and he has IDD. And Justin made me understand how every minute counts and the joys of every little thing. And I just want to say that I do remember going to the Friday night dances and just seeing the joy in all the faces of the young folks that were there and how they looked forward to it. And all the other events for people with IDD. It's near and dear to my heart, and I'm so glad that you're here today, and I look forward to seeing you all at lunch, but welcome and thank you.
Sharon Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege to speak about this subject.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, colleagues, when I heard the senator from Carbondale say that his local CCB director said, you can't run for office unless you come and see us. I ran for office with some knowledge of my local community center board from working on a ballot issue with them. But, you know, as we run for office, both sides of the aisle, some of us come with a very specific issue that we care about that brings us here. I think most of us come because we have a general interest in public policy, politics, and ethos, and want to make a difference. And I confess, issues for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities was not something I said a single word about on the stump when I first ran for office. I talked about a whole lot of other issues. I'll leave them to your imagination, and we all have the issues that are of interest to our constituents that poll very high and so forth. But first and foremost, we want to make a difference. And so I was fortunate enough, actually, to have a CCB director find me in my first interim, educate me, and make my second session incredibly successful with legislation for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, something I never found, would have found without that, nor would I have sought. And it changed my life and my legislative career. There aren't many issues, I think, that we handle and that we carry that a year or so later someone will come to you personally at a town hall meeting or community event, or just walk up to you when you're at church or visiting a school and say, Representative, Senator, you don't know me, or maybe we met just once, you changed my son's life, you changed my daughter's life, they have employment because of you. And working with people across the aisle for an issue that has broad bipartisan support changed my legislative career as well. So I want to thank the people with our community center boards, the people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families who have advocated, have become involved, and have changed all of us. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you at lunch.
Senator Fields.
Good morning, Mr. President and colleagues. I stand in strong support as an advocate for people with intellectual, developmental disabilities and their families. I want to thank you for allowing me to be a voice for your concerns. I can remember when I was first elected in 2011, I was contacted by the victim services in the police department at Aurora, who shared with me how oftentimes people with intellectual developmental disabilities are targets for crimes. And they shared with me this one story that still sticks with me today, who was an employee at a Goodwill Enterprise organization. And she was targeted by her supervisor. That ultimately led to sexual assault. And she wasn't able to communicate to law enforcement the scenario and the pathway of how it happened, but she was able to do that through someone that was able to interpret and try to describe the nature of their crime. And because of that, we were able to introduce and pass legislation to protect those who have an intellectual developmental disability. So I want to thank those who kind of understand this world that you operate in, because it's not easy when you try to find independent living residence for those, or those who want to be integrated into our public school systems, or those who just may want to participate in an extracurricular activity. Let's say it's baseball, gymnastics, football, whatever. You guys are lending voices to people who may be different, and that's okay, because our world is different and it incorporates a variety of different things and people. So I want to just thank you for all you do as it relates to helping these young people and adults find jobs and find meaningful access to be contributing members of our society. So I'm here to say thank you for all you do.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Happy to stand with all of you in support. Thank the senator from Aurora for her comments. If you haven't been to the dinner hosted by Developmental Pathways, go. If there's a dinner like that, if there's a fundraiser like that for another such entity in the district that you represent, go. Do you remember, colleagues, the excitement you felt when you first walked into this chamber and you got to shed that hyphen elect? And you come down here and take the oath of office with the Chief Justice and you become a member of this chamber. That's something to be proud of. We all work hard to get here. We go out and earn votes from constituents and we get the right, the opportunity, the privilege to come here in this room and debate. That's what it reminds me of when I go to the Developmental Pathways dinner and see people recognized for their accomplishment in the workplace, in athletics, in performance. It's their opportunity to be recognized for their good work. And if you think it's just for them, you would be absolutely wrong. You will be blessed that evening, that day, and for the rest of your life. After my first Developmental Pathways dinner, I set a goal for myself when I'm done here and when we're allowed to be back on a board or out there in the private sector making decisions. I would love to be on the board for Developmental Pathways or Special Olympics. The joy that you see when a person crosses the finish line or achieves that personal best, it's just unmatched. In my life, the only thing I could compare it to is the birth of my sons, the day I got married to the greatest person in my life, or the day I got to stand here and raise my hand and become part of this membership. Please support these organizations in your community, and if you're looking for something to shine that bright light of hope and inspiration in your life, go to the Developmental Pathways dinner. Thank you, Mr. President.